Welcome to the second Northrop Grumman Google Hangout. Today's session will focus on women in weather. We are so pleased to have a group of women with us today who have chosen to study in the fields of science, technology, engineering, or math, and then apply that to the weather domain. At Northrop Grumman, we have tens of thousands of engineers, many of whom are women. We see firsthand every day how that diversity helps to drive better performance outcomes. And we're so pleased to have a group of women with us today who can inspire women all over the world to pursue careers in STEM and apply that to the weather domain. We are committed to having a weather-ready nation, and these women are helping to lead the charge. So we hope that today's session will inspire you, and we thank you for joining us. Now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Laura.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Laura Delgado Lopez. I'm a project manager at Secure World Foundation and your moderator for today's discussion. Join us as we celebrate National Women's History Month and hear from top professionals with unique careers in the world of weather. First, let me introduce our panelists. Joining us today are Courtney Dragon, Director of the International Activities Office of the National Weather Service of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA; Maria La Rosa, Meteorologist at the Weather Channel; Robin Heffernan, Incident Meteorologist at NOAA's National Weather Service; Ginger C., Chief Meteorologist at ABC News; Rebecca Miller, Operations Meteorologist at Southwest Airlines; and Jenny Hibbert, Operations Meteorologist at Fugro Geos. We will kick off the discussion and then we'll take your questions, so please join the conversation via Twitter using hashtag ExtremeWX and hashtag. Courtney, let's start with you. When we look at the full chain of weather information, the first link is, of course, the National Weather Service. How would you describe the process of acquiring and translating data and the role that meteorologists play at the agency?
Well, thanks, Laura, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. I would say it starts with the National Weather Service collecting billions of observations from our radars, from satellites, from ground stations, from weather balloons, and from voluntary observing networks, and then running these observations through our numerical models from the global scale down to the storm scale. Then our forecasters assimilate this information and as well as apply their own skill and experience to creating our forecasts and warnings. These are the warnings that you hear on the radio, see on TV, or get over the internet or the iPhone. So I think that's how I describe our role in the forecasting process as well as the weather enterprise as a whole. But I also want to remind folks that the Weather Service doesn't just employ meteorologists. I'm, for example, an international relations specialist. I think our agency is recognizing that we need to employ more than just meteorologists, hydrologists, climatologists. We also need to have physical and social scientists on board as we all build a weather-ready nation.
Excellent. That's a great point. And that brings me also to talk to Maria, one of our broadcast meteorologists on the panel, about that important role of communicating with the public. Maria, could you describe some of the unique, interesting aspects of this job? And it's a big responsibility.
I think you summed it up beautifully just now. It is a huge responsibility. And when you're talking about communicating incredibly important information on a daily basis on a national level, you have to keep in mind that with a broadcast meteorologist, there's this long history of being that sort of extra family member in your living room every night that's telling you about the storms that you need a heads up on, the big blizzards that may cancel your kid's school. So that responsibility is real, and I think everyone on this panel, meteorologists everywhere, take that very seriously. The unique thing about the national level is that, you know, again, part of that history with broadcast meteorologists that you are that local authority about the weather. You have to be that, and you have to be knowledgeable on national weather, weather systems coming from the West Coast and how that will impact the Southern Plains eventually into the Northeast. So what you have to do now, especially more than ever with, you know, so many ways to get your weather information, is you still have to be that family-friendly face in people's living rooms to make sure that they are aware of everything that's not only happening nationally, but what will eventually move into their neighborhood. So I think One thing unique now is, again, the many ways you can get your weather information, and TV still being a really important and very useful mechanism to do just that.
And I think you touched up on a great point that leads me to a great question for Ginger about needing to know all kinds of different information. And so, Ginger, you have also had the experience to cover many different kinds of weather events. What would you say are some of the skills that are valuable in that position, kind of responding to what Maria just talked about?
Yeah, I think that education is first, having the proper education. Fortunately for me, where I went to college, we had a course called storm chasing. So we were able to go out in the plains and see storms form. I never learned out of a book what I did there. So I think having the education, then the experience of covering those storms, and then the stories that follow after, that's the responsibility. And I think Maria hit it really well, that you go from local to a national scale. You first have to get people's attention, because bottom line, it's still entertainment. At the bottom of everything, we all have to communicate in a way that people are going to clearly understand, but care to understand. So I think the skill of having weather be important on the front end, the education, the information, but then also the way that you present it is huge. And so that's the part that I think we on a daily basis have to balance. And as a group, I hope we can even get to work better together in the future.
And there's also, of course, a matter of trust, right? For those of us that know that the source of the data begins with the National Weather Service, we know we can trust the source. But then once you find all these different outlets for information on weather, I think that's where people sometimes get a little confused. So what would you say about that in terms of building and maintaining trust?
I think that that's something that because of social media, it has completely changed the game. But I think there were issues before. Even television wasn't always the place that you necessarily got the same information. I'll have people all the time write me and say, well, I've got all these different people in my market alone that are telling me all of these different things. And I think that that is something that we have to watch for. That's scary. And in social media, it needs to be streamlined. So I know I've talked a lot to the American Meteorological Society about, making sure that we have a seal up for people that, can easily and confidently and trustworthy get all of that info from the National Weather Service and from our own forecasting and get that out to the public. Take that very seriously.
Excellent. Maria, do you want to add anything on that point?
No, I think that's huge, and that's one of the new. I don't know if I call it a battlefront, but the forces of social media are huge, and it's a love-hate. It's a work-with struggle sometimes to get the clear, has to be concise information and message out there when it's such a crowded and noisy place sometimes, especially when there are big weather events. So that's always going to be a challenge, and I think one of the big things that as broadcasters, as communicators, we'll constantly have to be aware of. How clear is our message? How concise is it? And are we getting our message through? And that's every day, whether it's a blizzard or a sunny day. There's a lot of noise out there, so you do have to make it clear.
Indeed. Now let's talk a little bit about one of the unique careers that we want more people to be aware of today. Incident meteorologists deliver information to help make better decisions in situations that go beyond our usual everyday activities. Robin, what are specific examples of situations where you have found this information, weather information, to be particularly valuable?
Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit more about what is an incident meteorologist. We call them IMETs for short, and incident meteorologists are essentially National Weather Service forecasters who volunteer to take on an additional role of being dispatched to incidents of need to provide weather support information. Now, these incidents could be wildfires, they could be hazardous material spills, they could be search and rescue. Many times, natural disaster declarations we respond to. It can be any of those things, but these forecasters go out there, they work outdoors, on the front lines, hand in hand with the incident responders, providing weather information to those folks. And it's a pretty exciting place to be. So that weather information quite often is used mainly for safety of both the incident personnel as well as the public in the general facility of the incident, but also it is used to make some pretty critical decisions about incident management. An example of those decisions might be weighing the risks involved with different tactics or strategies and how to manage an incident. It might be a decision on how and where to deploy specific resources, when to move resources to get them out of harm's way. So some pretty important decisions are made. Now, our forecasters do work long hours. 12-hour days are not uncommon. They could be dispatched up to 2 weeks at a time away from their homes and families in rather harsh conditions, particularly on our wildfires. You're camping out with the incident personnel in a smoky environment. But the true reward is the service you provide and the value you see in the forecast you're providing to the incident responders. Perhaps you make a forecast that in the middle of the night you know that a severe thunderstorm is coming and you alert the incident camp that they need to evacuate so they can get to safety. Or perhaps you're the word that gets to the firefighters that a wind shift is coming and the fire is going to change direction, and they get to move into a safety zone and deploy their shelters, and they are safe because of that. That's an incredibly rewarding experience, and it challenges you in ways that are pretty incredible, but the reward and the satisfaction of the job is just as incredible, if not better. So very interesting and rewarding role of work.
And of course, it all goes back to safety. And another great example of how critical these decisions can be, we see in the aviation industry. Many of us can recall when weather events have impacted our travel plans. So talking to Becky now, can you give us examples of the steps you go through and the considerations you make to minimize disruption at the airline when weather impacts travel?
Yes, well, I'll tell you what, this is my second meteorology career. I spent the first 20 years or so in the television industry, and now I've crossed over into the aviation industry. And so what we do at Southwest Airlines is forecast the weather for all of the cities that Southwest flies to. So we've got over 100 cities or so throughout the U.S. and in the Caribbean and in Mexico and now in Costa Rica. So what we do is we forecast the weather. We provide weather support to all of the Southwest Airlines decision makers. We're not the ones making the decision whether or not a flight might be delayed or canceled, but we provide that weather support so that they can make an educated decision. We help to increase the operational safety of the airline and also the efficiency. We get together twice a day with meetings throughout the building with dispatch, with flight operations, with maintenance and ground operations, crew scheduling, and proactive customer service. And we're also the liaison between the FAA and the National Weather Service. We also do a lot of research with past weather events, and we also do a lot of industry involvement. We have a little set of weather instruments on the outside of a plane, much like a radio sonde. So every time a plane takes off and lands, we're getting a skew of what's going on right there at that airport when the plane is taking off, when the plane is landing. So we're always able to take a cross-section of the atmosphere and to analyze it at any point of time when that plane is taking off or landing to see what's happening at that particular city. So if we see a big snowstorm coming that we think is going to hit between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock at night with 6 inches of snow, then we're able to alert that city, that station, those ground operations, and then our customers and let them know, hey, this is what's going to happen. Our decision makers will say, you know what, I think we're going to cancel our flights at that time, and we can let all of our customers know, preferably a day ahead of time, but at least several hours ahead of time so they can make other plans themselves.
And of course, reduce the economic impacts of potential disruption.
Absolutely.
And Jennifer's job also requires considering economic implications. What kinds of weather-related risks do your customers manage in the part of the world? And I don't think I've mentioned that. I believe you're based in Singapore?
Yes, that's right. I'm calling in from Singapore right now, so
Wow.
from you guys. I'm working in offshore oil and gas. So I'm providing forecasts of the marine conditions for offshore vessels and platforms that are operating out in the open waters. My office here is focusing mostly on Southeast Asia, but previously I was working in Houston, and we were a global operation, so I've the experience in forecasting for all the marine environments across the world. And the marine environment is a bit interesting, much like what what Robin was telling us about her incident meteorology and what Becky is telling us about the aviation meteorology, oil and gas is kind of similar in that way, where it's very much operational safety implications. You know, you're protecting assets and property. You know, sometimes our forecasts are making, you know, $5 or $10 million go or no go decisions. So there's quite a bit of there's quite a bit of weight on our forecasts that we provide. They're rather high stakes. I get to go offshore sometimes. They'll bring us onto the rigs, and much like the incident meteorologist that Robin was telling us about, it's, you know, you're on the scene. You are providing firsthand weather information for these people who are working on deck. They are working in, you know, like on an open deck where there's equipment, there are waves splashing over. You know, these are real people that are in real like harm's way here. And so when you're standing there and you're feeling that weather and you're seeing these people that are highly impacted by your weather and by the forecast that you're presenting, it really makes your job very real, and it's very satisfying and exciting.
And so now, kind of building on some of the comments that have been raised about different data sources, and I think particularly those of you that are involved in critical. So can you all, whoever wants to jump in, talk about how the investments in advanced platforms, advanced models, computing that can lead to more accurate forecasts, what kind of impact do you see these technologies and these investments having in your jobs?
I could start for the television side. I'm happy to jump in. I think that us being more correct. I think that the accuracy getting even greater since I started about 15 years ago, watching even in that short of time how much people put their trust and their need for great information is so much higher than it even was 10 years ago. So as that changes and as the accuracy gets better with the modeling and then gets better in the way that we're able to showcase it, people are going to expect more. So I think the responsibility level goes up because they say, well, you got the next 3 to 5 days right. Now let's talk 10. How come that's always wrong? And then it's going to keep growing that way, which I think is fascinating and exciting, and that's why I love being in this field, because it's so far from over. We've got a lot yet to go, and I know that people are going to yearn for more because of this.
And I'll agree with Ginger. When I started in the industry, which was about 20 years ago or so, I was working with people that started 20 years before me, and they didn't even have satellite maps. I can't even imagine doing weather every day not seeing a satellite, but we didn't even have satellites in the 1960s. So every year we're just seeing more and more technology. The more we learn, the better off it is for us. And I think meteorology is a very, very young science, and that's what makes it so challenging and also so inexact, is that I don't even think at this point we know what we don't know. So we constantly need to be striving and coming up with better technology and better computer models for everything.
From the incident management side of things and the incident meteorologist, observations are everything to us. And one of the main reasons is because there's not very many. Many times these incidents are out in remote locations where there aren't very many observations, especially surface observations. Remote sensing is very valuable to us, and anytime we can get some real surface observations, it's very important to us. The Federal Land Management Agencies manage a network, weather station network, RAWS is what it's called, and those are stations that are out in the wildlands, but they also have portable systems that we can order up on incidents that will come to your location. You can set it up on your incident and you can get those observations. In addition to that, the incident meteorologists are equipped with their own upper air system. So they release their own upper air radiosondes on the incident, and that information does feed back into the National Weather Service weather models to improve the forecast for that location.
And I'd just add that, unlike Robin, who's out in the field, advances in technology may not affect my actual day-to-day work, but since U.S. technology, U.S. companies, and the National Weather Service are so highly regarded in the global community, I would say that as we advance, we create greater opportunities to collaborate with our foreign partners. And oftentimes they want to partner with us on not just like research and development, but also sharing ways that we can apply these new technologies to accelerate our own mission delivery.
That's a great point, and I want to come back to that. Anybody else in the panel want to answer about the role of technology and those advancements?
I have a comment about that, just from, Robin talking about the lack of observations in a lot of remote areas. Most of the oceans across the world, we have zero information about. We hardly get any ship observations, and if we do, they're, maybe 12 or 24 hours old. So we're relying entirely on technology for the most part, and most of our skill in forecasting comes from the human experience and from, my firsthand offshore experience and knowing how that feels when you're on a boat and how that's going to translate into what your wave heights look like on a report. It's not as, you can't just pull that directly out of model data. That takes a lot of processing and interpretation. And so there's really a huge room for improvement for our modeling capabilities, especially with nearshore wave modelings and some of in complex coastline situations. There's a huge room for improvement there, and that would really benefit the industry and really benefit people that are offshore making these really weather-sensitive decisions.
So Jenny, just to respond to something you just raised about limited availability of data and information about the oceans, so would you say that volunteering this information is something that the general public, young professional students, can help, can take that first step to perhaps become involved in the weather industry as a field?
Well, I think, the Novice Observer Network, just for land-based, I mean, that's something that pretty much anybody can do. Any student, anybody that is a weather enthusiast can be part of the Weather Observation Network. From the marine side, we would love if every vessel that was out there on the seas would send a report back to NOAA, back to the OPC and different and the National Data Buoy Center and things like that. If we can just compile all that information, that would really do us a lot of good. Now we've got all these vessels that are seeing the weather, but they're not necessarily reporting it to somebody who can do something with that.
Excellent. I also want to go back to something that Becky mentioned before about having had decades already in this field, and I think combined in this panel we have a lot of knowledge. I want you all to comment on how have you seen the field evolve? Do you see more opportunities for women than when you started? What other kinds of big major trends have you seen throughout your careers?
Well, since you addressed me, I'll answer quickly. When I first was interviewing at colleges to pick what college I wanted to go to, one of them wouldn't even talk to me because I was a girl. Would not even speak to me. The second college, Texas A&M, where I got my degree, they did speak with me, and they said, well, we'll talk to you, but girls don't usually do very well in math. So at that point, I thought my mom was going to jump over the desk and strangle the guy that told me that. So I wound up going to A&M, and I did well in math. I don't like math, but I can do it. And so I wound up, finishing up my degree. And when I was a senior, the head of our weather station had a heart attack. So they asked me to take over for him. And my intention was to kind of help him out till he was able to come back to college and take over his job. And then I was going to go to the Hurricane Center, and my dream job was to run the Hurricane Center. So after my boss was able to come back, there was no opening at the Weather Service at the Hurricane Center, and I met the head of the Hurricane Center, and he said, you don't want to do this. So I got an offer from television, and they said, well, you want to do this? And I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. And then I wound up staying with it forever. But I tell you what, and Ginger can address this as well, women on television are treated much, much differently than men are. We are not looked at as scientists. We are looked at as paper dolls. I don't like your hair. I don't like your earrings. I don't like your makeup. I don't think that jacket looks good on you. I don't think that dress looks good on you. Look how big your butt looks. Look how big your boobs look. Oh my gosh, are you pregnant? What happened to you last week from this week? And it's really hard to get your message across to the public because you're bombarded with all kinds of criticisms from people, and the internet makes it a lot worse. So for a while there, it was looking really good for women. Oh my gosh, we're getting into all these different fields now. And now with the internet and the anonymity, now we're getting attacked all over again. So it kind of goes up and down, and all you can do is do the best job that you can do and ignore those kind of haters that are out there, because eventually, gradually, they'll come to love you.
They do. I think that's exactly right. And you know, Rebecca's talking about this, and it's something that I've had to tell myself over and over and over, is that people don't know. They don't know, and other people on the panel that are not in television, outside of Maria and I and Becky before, it's like, I'm sure you've been asked right away when you say, I'm a meteorologist or I'm this, they'll say, oh, are you in TV? The misunderstanding of what a meteorologist is our #1 problem. I think that is a huge issue. Just people, it's like a scary word. It's too long or something. It's very, which speaks to the education level of who I think in general we're talking to. But there are people I work with, and I've worked with them for 3 years at ABC, and they still don't know that I'm a meteorologist. And so I'll run into this. Seriously, it happens every day. And I'm realizing more and more every day that I have to scream it from the mountaintops, and scream it confidently and proudly. And I think in some people, you know, the people closest to me, they hear it a lot. But that's how we're going to change. It's changing a stereotype, not just from the television side, but on the level of respect for women in many workplaces, in many different, even my mother is a nurse practitioner, which is, it takes a ton. She has three master's degrees. She has everything short of going into, you know, to be a doctor. But people are like, oh, she's just a nurse. It happens with labeling all the time, and I think that that's a much larger issue than just in the world of, you know, but it's all sciences. I look at my mother and I say, I am so proud of her, but what she's done in 30 years of being a neonatal nurse practitioner, not one they still will call her a basic candy striper, and it's it just blows my mind. So I hope that we can, you know, that is a huge goal of mine, is to get rid of the weather girl term. It's got to go. When it's inappropriate, it's inappropriate. Maybe Maria can speak to more of that, but it fuels me every day.
I wanna like high five you through the camera right now, both of you guys, because you both bring up wonderful points. Because when I got into this business 17-ish years ago, it was before YouTube, it was before social media, so I was able to kind of grow quietly in a way, but you definitely had bosses and coworkers doing the whole weather girl, weather babe thing. I do want to point out that when I got into meteorology, you know, after high school, and then when I went into Penn State, and looking back on it now, I realized that I wasn't discouraged because I was female, but I wasn't necessarily encouraged. And what I love seeing now, I have 3 boys, so I am the lone queen in my household, but what I love
Maria, I think we lost you. I'll wait a couple of seconds. Let's see if we can hear you. And if not, what I'll do
there are girls that will... Did I drop out?
Yes. I think we just got you back. So if you could go back to, you were the sole queen of your family.
Good place to leave off, right? No, I was just going to say that my boys are going to school and they're learning about science, and this emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, but it's everyone, girls and boys, and these young ladies are going to school now, not only just being encouraged as a student, but encouraged as a girl, and to be proud to be doing things like a girl. And my hope is that in the future they don't necessarily see this difference. There won't be necessarily a need for a hangout like this where, you know, they will boys are also seeing that they have a mom or go out and be on TV. And I think it's awesome. So that's my hope for the change that I've seen over the last decade or so.
Thank you. Courtney, same question. What big trends have you seen over your career?
Right, thank you. Yeah, I want to touch on that encouragement piece, but I always think of my answer to this as kind of twofold. I am a woman and I'm in the workplace, but I also work in the international arena. So here, in my own experience, I certainly recognize we have a long way to go. There's a lot of things that I think we need to continue to work on in terms of breaking the glass ceiling, breaking down norms and stereotypes. But I definitely have seen an increased or upward trend in opportunities and that space for encouragement of younger generations, especially younger girls and women, in terms of education and job opportunities. However, that's not the case around the world. In a lot of countries, the gender divide is a lot greater than here in the United States, and it can affect so many more aspects of a woman's livelihood beyond education and her job opportunities. We're finding, and I've seen over my career, that women are increasingly vulnerable to weather, water, and climate extremes. The World Health Organization is reporting that more women, especially younger women, are killed from natural disasters than men. Yet studies show that they're more risk averse and have a greater perceived sense of threat from natural disasters. So it's really a question as to why they're this vulnerable community. I think a positive and something that I see as trending upward is programs and opportunities to sort of address this gender balancing through programs, not just like the STEM program that addresses education, but programs through the World the gender across a variety of issues, including the resiliency piece. So STEM is a really important type of thing to promote on the education of younger girls. And then as women progress beyond school age, it's important to bring them into the resiliency and preparedness discussion because they have such a strong tie to local communities.
Great, thank you. Jenny and Robin, do you also want to comment on this question about major trends that you've seen in your careers?
Yeah. Especially going back to some of you ladies that are in the broadcast fields, because I do a bit of broadcast for my job, and being in the oil and gas sector is just a very different world. If you want easy crowd to please, get into offshore oil and gas because they'll love you.
Jenny, I'll ask you to speak a little more loudly because we're not quite getting everything you're saying.
Okay. I do some video broadcasts for our offshore oil and gas clients. Very easy crowd to please. But I've had an interesting experience expecting getting into oil and gas, which is definitely a male-dominated field, where I have not really run into much in the way of sexism. I've had most of the men very much willing to let this woman onto their rig, let them be in a rather high position on the boat. I get equal rights, and there's quite a bit of progress in that regard, way more than I was expecting getting into it. I was expecting there to be this good old boys club that I was not allowed into, and that's just not been the case at all. I've been promoted into management in my career. I think this is the best time to be a woman in the workplace in any industry right now, but especially in science, I think that we've got more opportunities than ever before.
That's extremely encouraging.
Yeah.
And I have to agree, Jenny. I actually started my career in the energy industry, and I agree that is a very welcoming crowd. They want the information, they want you to be accurate, and they could care less about your gender. Yep. But on the weather service side of things, I've really seen some significant advancements and upward movement with regard to the opportunities for women, and I feel nothing but support and encouragement from this agency to participate. And just looking at our incident meteorologists alone, which not only is it a science, which is typically you see less participation from women in that nationally, but it's also an outdoor science. We've had, over the past 30 years, about 7% of our incident meteorologists have been women. Right now, we're currently sitting at 14%. So that's double our 30-year average of women participation. And it's encouraging not only from the weather side of things, but all the female firefighters that we work with all the time in the fires. They're female smoke jumpers and female firefighters, and it's just encouraging to see that participation. And one last thing to say, I would say to any of those who are intimidated maybe by the math and stuff like that that's involved in this science, don't be. You can do it.
And actually, that makes me want to ask about good pieces of advice that you guys have gotten over the years. One of the mentions I want to make is, again, this event is brought to you by the American Astronautical Society and the American Meteorological Society. These are professional organizations. They're really great as a way to interact with different with professionals in different stages of their career and learn about their jobs, their experiences, just as we're doing today. So I want to mention that, but I'd love to learn what some other valuable pieces of advice you guys have gotten over the years that when you look back, has really helped you in your professional development.
Okay, I'll go. don't afraid to ask for help. And if you're in school right now and you're struggling with math or physics or computer science or whatever it may be, don't be afraid to go to your professors after classes ended and say, can you help me understand this? I'm just not getting it. Look to your upperclassmen and ask them for help as well. And then once you're in the industry, look to people that have been there much longer than you have and ask them for opinions, ask them for help. And also, once you've got that job, help those people who are trying to come up behind you and make sure that you're available to them when they need help.
I think that can play off of that too. Being social has been something that wasn't always easy for me. I really was more of a typical not television person because I didn't go into TV at all into college thinking I was going to be in TV. I thought I was going to be researching in a field. And what I've learned now is that you have to talk to people, not just on a camera, but you actually have to talk to the people around you, because just a conversation about my life, about how I became who even yesterday, I had a company come in and they were interviewing me about my background, and I was talking about how I decided to get into television later than most do, and a couple of the people that I work with were like, I never knew that about you. Where, talking over breakfast, that would have started to build that conversation. And then the relationships, and on a very selfish side, the relationships that you can create at a conference, at a Google Hangout, this may change what your future holds, because most of my jobs came from meeting people face to face at a conference. I can think specifically, a man named Rick DeMaio remembered me from a conference, even though it was 2 years before, and then invited me to Chicago to interview for a job. I ended up not taking that job, but a different job. But it all starts to come together. So I think just talking sounds very easy, but it's very true.
And I'll go off of that. Someone said to me, don't worry about what other people think. So you talk to people, or you aren't afraid of those math classes, but you worry, what will people think? I'm a girl, I'm interested in science, I'm a girl, I want to do international relations. What will they think if I'm a mother and a wife and I leave my kids or my husband? I'm not being a traditional woman. Don't worry about what people think. I remember when I was going through a program after graduate school to find out where I wanted to work, I knew I wanted to go into the public sector. And I was worried, what would all my friends think? They're going out, they're becoming lawyers with their degrees, similar degrees than mine, and they're making all this money, but don't worry what people think. Do what you want to do. And I wound up at the Weather Service, and I thought to myself, why would they want someone with an international relations degree at the National Weather Service? I'm not a meteorologist, but don't worry what people think. Do what you want to do what interests you, and you'll be successful because you have a passion for it, because you're dedicated. So I think that's also a key piece of advice that I think about and still use to this day.
Yeah, I'd like to tag on to that, Courtney. That's an excellent piece of advice, and I would just say keep your focus. Really keep your focus on what you want and the unique value that you bring to the table for any position or any career field that you have. And if it's not about your gender, don't make it about your gender. And if it's not about what other people think, don't make it about what other people think. Just keep your focus.
I'll hop in too, and I'll just say that don't say no. When you think of yourself in one way, you might miss out on certain opportunities. I think Ginger and I have, since this TV career, I had no interest at all doing TV, and someone said, oh, why don't you try? And I said, okay. Mm-hmm. And when I got my first job, I hated general assignment reporting, but guess what? I learned to edit, I learned to write a package, go out on shoots. So I got
I think we lost you there a little bit, Maria, so I'll move on to Jenny.
Information in my life.
There's a bit of a delay. Yes. There's a bit of a delay. But I'll repeat. great point about not saying no. For example, if somebody asks you to speak at a panel on Google Plus Hangout, you say yes, and that's every time. Jenny, any valuable pieces of advice you'd like to repeat to our viewers?
Yeah, the same idea. Ask for things. The worst that somebody can say is no. That's fine, you know. But if you don't ever ask, then somebody's not going to know that that's what you want. And people are trying to help. My other big point is about integrity and your reputation, and how it takes years to build up your reputation, and especially in small, you know, the weather industry is very small. If you get into a specialized niche like, you know, energy trading, incident meteorology, offshore oil and gas, you're now in a pool of maybe, I mean, there's maybe, what, 50 people in the world that do what I do, or less. We all know each other. So it just came up the other day. Somebody was interviewing with a company, and somebody had heard their name before, and they knew who they were from a drinking story 10 years ago. And their answer was, I don't know if I trust this person, you know, they might have a drinking problem. And that was a decade ago, and that's still following them around. So, you know, for one, you know, keep alcohol in control, but for two, always be aware that, you know, your reputation that's your word, and make sure that you're always keeping true to that, and make sure that, you know, your name is valuable. And yeah, that's what you got.
No, that's a great point. And I think particularly, as somebody was saying before about the value of relationships, well, you want to make sure that you're conveying the right image of yourself, and one that people will respect. I want to go back to a comment that Courtney was making about how, you know, not being a technically oriented person but still interested in science, and how that's still very valuable, not just in the weather service but also in the industry writ large. And my own background is also policy and political science, and I'm still very passionate and interested in science. So I wonder if, Courtney, you can build on that point and talk a little bit more about how those that may be watching that are perhaps interested in communications, writing, social sciences, how they could play a role in making for a weather-ready nation.
Well, sure. So, you know, to build a weather-ready nation, we need all disciplines to sort of help with communicating the message and helping to get people to be ready, responsive, and resilient. I came to the National Weather Service after completing a degree in international relations because I was interested in helping to communicate the importance of science and technology information to the international world, and vice versa, to get more data and more information back into our own forecasting process. And I felt, and the agency also felt, that there was a skill set involved in, you know, the analyzing of not just the observations and the numbers and the models, but also of people and of trends around the globe and of policies from other countries that could be advantageous in achieving this objective. So that's how I came to be an international relations specialist in the National Weather Service. And I think, though, that it's important for the country as a whole to recognize that, you know, there's a big world out there, and so to look just inward at solving our own problems and trying to do, no matter what you're doing, whether it's you know, engineering, or it's meteorology, or it's climatology, or it's education, or the healthcare system, there's a big world out there, and there's a lot to learn from a variety of people, and there's a lot to be gained by cooperating. And so I think that especially in the public sector, we're recognizing throughout any agency, whether it be the Weather Service, NOAA, or the Department of Health and Human Services, or the Department of Homeland Security, that we're recognizing that we need to have a broad multidisciplinary workforce in order to achieve all of our missions.
Anybody want to jump in on that response? Well, I think you just also highlighted the truly global character of this field. And of course, the National Weather Service collaborates with other countries. I think researchers routinely collaborate with colleagues overseas. I wonder if, Becky, you can mention, is there any part of coordination that you need to do with colleagues from other countries?
Well, now we do, sure, because we're flying to Mexico, we're flying to Costa Rica, we're flying to the Caribbean. So, sure, if we have questions about something that might be going on in their airport, if they're having runway closures, if they're having weather concerns down there. We're always on the phone with the local stations down there. For example, last year when Cabo was hit by the hurricane, we had special considerations to take into place regarding the runway, because the runway there isn't a grooved runway, so just a little bit amount of rain will stay there and cause planes to slide. A grooved runway allows for water to dissipate much easier. So we're on the phone with them a lot of times asking, there are eyes on the ground over there. We get the weather reports, and but we can't see anything, just like in this country. So we're always on the phone with the other nations that we fly to. Not the nation so much that we don't fly to.
Jenny, I'm sure you have a similar experience when it comes to working with your customers.
Yeah, well, when it comes to international data, I hope everybody here is thoroughly appreciating the National Weather Service, because I know abroad, live and die by NOAA and SEP. Most companies around the world are using some amount, if not mostly, relying on the data coming out of the National Weather Service, out of NSEP. That's really the global modeling center of the world. There's some other places like the UK, they sell a couple models, Canadian sells a model, and there's a few others, but they're quite expensive, and the National Weather Service data is really our primary thing. We've got some other meteorology services around here, like Philippines has a good tropical, Pagasa is their weather service, and that's on the forefront of tropical forecasting because they're just getting hammered by typhoons constantly. But really, when you're talking about international, like the other government agencies, the USA is really leading the way with the weather services.
I can hop in because Jenny, I can say from a broadcasting perspective, we do all weather stories around the world. So I've oftentimes seen a part of the world where they want me to be an expert in, and I'll go, oh my gosh, I've got to do a bunch of research, and I am missing the weather service because you don't have that everywhere. And I remember even doing a story when Torino had the Olympics, and I did a story on how much it cost to outfit that area in Italy with all of the radars, all of the observations, the mesonets, everything that we are so used to forecasting with over there, and it was millions upon millions of dollars. And so, because it was just an area that just had not seen that, they had not had any weather observations. So yeah, I'm very grateful all the time when I talking globally, and I have the opportunity of going this weekend to Paris. I'm going to the WMO IPCC, the global conference for weather. So I feel like I'm going to be learning a lot there, because that is one area where I feel weak. When something happens, when a plane goes down, I go, okay, now I've got to do a lot of forecasting.
Laura, from the weather. Sorry, Robin.
Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead, Courtney, and then we'll loop back to Robin.
Oh. Well, I just wanted to touch on that because, I think you asked initially about my role, and what I see as playing that role for the National Weather Service. But I think it's also important to understand that, the international work that the National Weather Service does isn't just because we have to or we're told to. We really do it because we believe that it brings benefit both to our mission as well as the weather enterprise as a whole, as I think people have heard from these stories from the panelists. And so people can explain better than I, but the weather in the United States is greatly affected by global systems. And so, for example, weather off the coast of Africa can affect hurricane generation in the Atlantic Basin, or tropical systems in Asia can loop north and back east, and it affects weather on the west coast in Alaska. So by cooperating internationally with our partners in other foreign weather services, as well as through the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, that coordinates the standardization of how we observe, when we observe, and ensures that we get that data back into those numerical models that I was talking about. I think that international cooperation is fundamental to us delivering on our mission back here at home. So it's really kind of a two-way street, and it does, even though the National Weather Service's mission is to protect life and property here in the United States, international cooperation is central to that.
Excellent. Robin?
Well, I'm glad you went first, Courtney, because that was a good intro into what my comment was going to be, which is in the Incident Meteorologist program with the National Weather Service, we actually do an exchange with Australia, being that our fire seasons are opposite one another. We send forecasters to Australia to forecast during their peak fire season, and they come here during our peak fire season. And not only do we help each other out in providing some additional forecast support during that time frame, we've learned a lot from each other in how to provide the services to wildland firefighters in the process. In addition to that, we work with our federal land management agencies and Natural Resources Canada and Servicio Meteorológico Nacional in Mexico in coming up with our fire projection forecasts and outlooks for the upcoming fire season.
Excellent. So it's also about learning how the others are handling these issues so that we can continue to improve our own processes. That's great. So we're a few minutes away from the top of the hour. This discussion has just flown by. So I do want to ask all of you to comment briefly. We've already talked about the past and the evolution. I want to ask all of you, what makes you excited about the future? What are you looking forward to? Robin, why don't you start?
Okay. I'm excited every day about the future. The fact that our opportunities are endless when it comes to decision support and building a weather-ready nation and providing tighter connections and relationships with our customers to find out what those needs are and actually being able to fill those needs on the weather side of things is just incredibly rewarding. And fulfilling to be able to know that you're providing the specific service that the user needs. And so that is continuing to expand. Those relationships are continuing to grow, and our capability and our ability to fulfill those needs continues to grow every day. So it's a very exciting place to be.
Becky.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about providing good weather information, and customers are our customer satisfaction, our number one goal at Southwest Airlines, and we want to make sure everybody is treated well, everybody is leaving on time, arriving on time, and if there is a delay or some sort of cancellation, that they know about it well ahead of time so that they can make their own plans and their other plans in case something happens with their particular flight. We want them to be happy. And you know what, one thing that I'm really excited about, our department is 6 people. We have only 6 of us. So I'm really excited about bringing some more on in the future. we could possibly be expanding our department shortly. So
You may have people calling then.
Well, check the website. Check the website all the time.
Courtney.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, hire women. No.
Yeah, we are. Half of our team is women, half our team is our guys, and they're all wonderful.
Yeah, what I think is exciting is the mission of the National Weather Service and the missions of the weather enterprise across the whole, I think is fantastic. And what I'm really excited about is taking the conversation not about weather and what's happening right now, but what is happening or what will happen in the future that helps roll into decision makers making the right decisions, whether it be social decisions or economic decisions, decisions that affect people's lives, save lives, help, with the economy. It's those kinds of conversations as we build a weather-ready nation, taking the discussion not to what's happening right now and the weather is about what's going on outside your window, but it's about how it can affect making the right decisions at the right time. And that makes us all not just build a weather-ready nation, but part of that equation. And I think that's really exciting, especially for our forecasters on the front lines, but I think it's the entire community as a whole.
Ginger.
Yeah, I think this is exciting. I always tell my team, and we have a team now at AVC of meteorologists. It's definitely not just Rob and I who are visible. I always tell my team that getting the credibility and accuracy inside our little circle is important first, because if you've got that locked in and you got the same story going, then getting it out to that next level of the public is going to be even better. So having this Google Hangout and starting the conversation here is great. The next step is getting it out even farther and having the opportunities to do that. I know that every day that responsibility is very big for me beyond, okay, this is the area where severe weather is. But I challenge myself to get on world news a word that maybe people have to go look up later because I've only got 30 seconds to say it. But I use the word scatterometer within the first 30 seconds of world news, and I think that's a win. Those are when we can start. it's not just to sound smart, but it's to say there's a lot more out there, and I think the appetite is there. I think the audience wants it. There is no dumbing down necessarily any longer. I think you have to make it clear, but making it clear and also encouraging everybody, not just scientists among scientists, to learn more and think more. I think that opportunity is very exciting going forward, especially in this position that I'm at with my team around me.
Jenny.
Well, I think the future is very exciting. From my perspective, there's still a huge room in the market for ambitious women that are looking to show some leadership. Things like, taking the plunge to move abroad to Singapore. That's quite an adventure. But we had openings, and we were a little bit, trying to find who would be a good candidate. It wasn't a matter of sifting through, 10 of the best candidates and then narrowing them down. It was a little bit of a search. So there's definitely still, there's jobs and opportunities out there. I think as we get into the future and the forecast technology gets better and humans are less important in the forecasting process, I think that's going to be shift the focus into more communicating the weather and how we're communicating it to the clients in different avenues. And I think that women especially are really cut out for that, potentially more than our male counterparts at times.
Excellent. Maria, before I leave the floor to you, I also want to ask you a question that we just got via social media. Were there any female mentors that helped you in your career? And then I'll ask you also to comment on the question I asked about the future.
Well, interestingly enough, it was many years before I had a female colleague that I worked with closely, and that's Kathy Orr. She's this chief meteorologist, CBS Philadelphia. So what I love about Kathy, as in all good mentors, is that she's smart, she was solid, she let me ask her questions and allowed me to look up to her, which, it sounds kind of weird, but, when you admire somebody, sometimes you feel a little like, oh, I don't want to bother them, but she never made me feel that way, and I think it's important to have a mentor like that, and especially a female mentor. So it was a few years before I actually had a female coworker as a meteorologist.
Okay, interesting. So hopefully, go ahead.
I was going to answer the other question about the future. Real quickly, I liked what Ginger said in talking about using the words, the big words, and educating the viewers is so important. But what I love and I'm excited about the future is that the public is so much more weather savvy today. They know more about the weather, which is really exciting. So you can take those little nuggets and dig really deep and get into the science behind. We love to do that at the Weather Channel all the time and make things really exciting and fun beyond saying, oh, it's going to be partly cloudy today and 70 degrees. So I'm excited about inspiring the next generation of meteorologists that are watching right now and thinking about what they want to do, maybe go into the National Weather Service or broadcasting, and they're being inspired right now, which is really exciting.
And I think definitely being inspired by all of you, and I want to please join me wherever you're watching us from. Join me in thanking our panelists for an excellent discussion. I feel like we could have kept going for another hour. This brings our Hangout to a close, but the conversation keeps going. Please remain engaged via social media. Share the link of today's event with your friends and family. Continue celebrating the amazing contributions of weather, the next generation science and technology, the systems that are coming up in line, some of what NOAA is launching, for example, the JPSS satellite that's coming up very soon. And of course, the skills of professionals like these wonderful women that we have met today that together deliver accurate weather information, helping people all over the world make better decisions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.